Viewer discretion is advised. This presentation describes an ancient epic containing themes of war, familial conflict, and mass death that may be disturbing to some audiences. Imagine a war so catastrophic, it was fought with weapons that could boil oceans and turn entire landscapes to dust. A war so vast, it involved millions of warriors and ended in just 18 days, wiping out an entire generation of men. This isn't a modern apocalypse. This is a story from a time of gods and demons, of celestial chariots and divine power. It is the story of the Mahabharata, but the most terrifying part of this apocalyptic war isn't the scale of its destruction. It's who was fighting. This wasn't a war between nations or empires. It was a war between cousins, brothers who grew up together, played the same games, and learned from the same teachers. Which leads to the one question that has echoed for thousands of years. How did a simple family dispute over a kingdom escalate into a conflict that would end the world as they knew it? To find the answer, we can't start on the battlefield. We have to go back to a promise that should never have been made. Our story begins in the kingdom of Hastinapura, the heart of the mighty Kuru dynasty. It was a realm of unimaginable wealth and power, ruled by King Shantanu. The king fell deeply in love with a woman of breathtaking beauty he met by the river Ganges. Her name was Ganga, and she was radiant, mysterious, and otherworldly. She agreed to marry him on one condition. He must never ever question her actions, no matter how strange or horrifying they seemed. Blinded by love, Shantanu agreed. One by one they had 7 sons. And one by one, immediately after their birth, Ganga walked to the river and drowned each child in the churning water. The king was paralyzed by grief, but bound by his promise, he said nothing. When their 8th son was born, and Ganga once again walked towards the river, Shantanu could bear it no longer. He broke his silence, screaming for her to stop. In that moment the spell was broken. Ganga revealed her true identity. She was the river goddess herself, cursed to bear children on earth. Her sons were celestial beings, and by drowning them, she was freeing their souls from their mortal prison. But because Shantanu had broken his vow, she could not free their 8th son. She spared his life, but her time in the mortal world was over. She vanished, taking the boy with her, promising to return him once he was trained in the arts of kings and warriors. Years later she kept her word. A young man, powerful and wise, appeared before the king. This was Devavrata, his last surviving son. He was the perfect heir, strong, righteous, and skilled in every weapon known to man. The future of the Kuru dynasty was secure. But fate, and the king's lonely heart, had other plans. Shantanu, now an old man, fell in love again. This time with Satyavati, the daughter of a simple fisherman. The fisherman, however, was ambitious. He would only allow his daughter to marry the king if he made a single promise, that Satyavati's son, and not Devavrata, would inherit the throne. The king was heartbroken. He could not dishonor his perfect, firstborn son. He returned to his palace in despair. Seeing his father's pain, Devavrata sought out the fisherman himself. To put his father's mind at ease, he made a vow that would change the course of history. He renounced his claim to the throne. The fisherman, however, was still not satisfied. "What if your sons," he asked, "decide to challenge my grandson for the throne?" In response, Devavrata made a second, even more extreme vow. He swore an oath of lifelong celibacy, ensuring he would never have children who could contest the throne. The gods themselves trembled at the severity of this sacrifice. From that day on, he was known as Bhishma, he of the terrible oath. King Shantanu married Satyavati, and they had 2 sons. But the kingdom, it seemed, was now cursed by Bhishma's sacrifice. The king soon died of a broken heart. Satyavati's 2 sons grew up to inherit the throne, but both died young and without any children of their own. The great Kuru dynasty, once the most powerful in the world, was now facing total extinction. There was no heir. In her desperation, Queen Satyavati turned to an ancient, controversial custom. She summoned a powerful sage named Vyasa, a mysterious forest-dwelling ascetic who, in a twist of fate, was also her illegitimate firstborn son from before her marriage to the king. She begged him to father children with the 2 widows of her dead son, to save the royal line. The first widow was so terrified by the sage's fierce, unkempt appearance that she closed her eyes during their union. As a result, her son Dhritarashtra was born blind. The second widow was so pale with fear that her son, Pandu, was born pale and sickly. And so, the line was saved, but it was fractured from the start. Dhritarashtra, the elder, was denied the throne because of his blindness, a bitterness he would carry his entire life. The crown instead passed to his younger brother, Pandu. Pandu was a great and noble king, but he carried his own curse. One day, while hunting, he accidentally shot a sage who was in the form of a deer. With his dying breath, the sage cursed Pandu. If he ever tried to have children with his wives, he would die instantly. Now both brothers were unable to produce a legitimate heir. Dhritarashtra was blind, and Pandu was cursed. The kingdom was once again on the brink of collapse. But the gods intervened. Pandu's first wife, Kunti, possessed a divine secret. Years earlier, she had been granted a mantra, a special prayer that could summon any god and have them grant her a child. With Pandu's blessing, she used the mantra. She called upon the god of justice, and had a son named Yudhishthira. She called upon the god of the wind, and had the immensely strong Bhima. She called upon the king of the gods, Indra, and had the master archer, Arjuna. Pandu's second wife used the mantra as well, summoning the twin gods of medicine to father her two sons, Nakula and Sahdeva. Together, these 5 divinely sired boys were known as the Pandavas. They were the sons of Pandu, heirs to the throne. Meanwhile, back in the palace, the blind brother Dhritarashtra had married the princess Gandhari. When she learned her husband was blind, she chose to blindfold herself for the rest of her life, to share in his darkness. But when news arrived that Pandu now had 5 sons, a furious jealousy consumed Dhritarashtra. He was the elder brother. The throne should have been his. His wife, Gandhari, had been pregnant for an unnaturally long 2 years, and in a fit of rage and frustration, she struck her own stomach. What emerged was not a baby, but a cold, hard ball of flesh. The same sage Vyasa appeared once more. He instructed her to have the mass cut into 100 pieces, and each piece placed into a pot of clarified butter to incubate. From these pots, 100 sons were born, the eldest named Duryodhana. These 100 brothers were known as the Kauravas. So now the stage was set. In one corner, the 5 Pandavas, sons of the cursed king, but fathered by the gods themselves. In the other, the 100 Kauravas, sons of the blind king, born of jealousy and a strange, unnatural birth. They were all cousins, all princes of the same royal bloodline, destined to grow up in the same palace. But they were not equals. One side was blessed by the heavens, the other was born from a dark ambition for power. And from the moment they first met as children, the seeds of the world's greatest war had already been sown. The royal court of Hastinapura became a pressure cooker of talent and jealousy. To train the 105 princes, the elders sought the greatest teacher in the land, a man named Dronacharya. Drona was a master of divine weaponry, but he was also a man haunted by a promise. Years ago, living in poverty, he couldn't even afford milk for his young son. He went to his childhood friend Drupada, now a powerful king, to ask for help. But the king, arrogant in his power, humiliated Drona, declaring that a king and a beggar could never be friends. Burning with shame, Drona swore an oath. One day, his students would crush King Drupada and deliver his kingdom to Drona as a teacher's fee. This was the man who would shape the destiny of 2 generations, a master warrior driven by a dark and personal vengeance. He took all the princes as his students, but from the very first day, the difference between them was as clear as night and day. The 5 Pandava brothers excelled. Yudhishthira, the eldest, mastered the spear and the chariot, but his true strength was his unwavering commitment to Dharma, to righteousness. The second brother, Bhima, was a force of nature. Possessed with the strength of 10,000 elephants, he was a master of the mace, and his raw power was terrifying. The twins, Nakula and Sahdeva, were brilliant swordsmen and masters of esoteric knowledge. But then there was Arjuna, the third Pandava brother. Arjuna was different. He was a prodigy, a genius of the bow and arrow. He practiced day and night, his focus absolute. To him, archery was not a skill. It was a form of meditation, a connection to the divine. The 100 Kaurava brothers, led by the eldest Duryodhana, could only watch in bitter envy. They were strong, they were skilled, but they lacked the Pandavas' innate brilliance and virtue. Duryodhana saw every bit of praise for his cousins as a personal insult. He saw the love the people had for the Pandavas, and it felt like theft. His jealousy wasn't just a rivalry. It was a sickness, a poison that twisted everything he saw. He saw Bhima's strength not as a gift but as a threat. In their childhood games, Bhima would use his incredible power to bully the 100 brothers, shaking them out of trees and holding them underwater until they gasped for air. It was cruel, and it fed Duryodhana's hatred. This hatred soon boiled over into a sinister plot. During a picnic by the river, Duryodhana mixed a deadly poison into Bhima's food. After Bhima ate, he fell unconscious. Duryodhana tied him up with vines and threw him into the sacred river Ganges, leaving him for dead. But fate, or perhaps the gods themselves, intervened. Bhima sank to the bottom of the river, into the realm of the Nagas, the divine serpent people. They recognized him as the grandson of their own kin, and not only cured him of the poison but granted him a celestial drink that increased his strength tenfold. When Bhima finally returned to the palace, alive and more powerful than ever, Duryodhana was stunned. His first attempt at murder had failed, but the line had been crossed. This was no longer a game. Drona, their teacher, saw the darkness growing. He knew he had to test their character as much as their skill. One day, he placed a wooden bird on a high branch and gathered the princes. He pointed to it and said, "Your task is to strike the eye of the bird." He called upon Yudhishthira first. "What do you see?" Yudhishthira replied, "I see you, my brothers, the tree and the bird." Drona dismissed him. He called Duryodhana. "What do you see?" Duryodhana answered, "I see the branch, the leaves, the bird's body." Drona dismissed him too. One by one, the princes failed the test. Finally, he called for Arjuna. "Arjuna," he said, "what do you see?" Without a moment's hesitation, his eyes fixed on the target, Arjuna replied, "Guru, I see only the eye of the bird." Drona smiled, then released the arrow. The arrow flew, a blur of motion, and struck the wooden bird perfectly in its eye. This was the essence of Arjuna, an unshakable, all-consuming focus that set him apart from everyone else on earth. Years passed, and the princes' training was complete. To showcase their incredible abilities, a grand tournament was held. The entire kingdom gathered, the stands overflowing with citizens eager to see their future leaders. One by one, the princes demonstrated their mastery of swords, maces, and chariots. Bhima and Duryodhana engaged in a ferocious mace battle. A clash of titans so violent, it had to be stopped before they killed each other. Then it was Arjuna's turn. He entered the arena, and a hush fell over the crowd. What he did next was not just archery, it was magic. He fired volleys of arrows that created fire and water. He shot 5 arrows into the mouth of a spinning iron boar. He created bridges and shields out of pure energy, using celestial weapons gifted by the gods. The crowd erupted, chanting his name. Arjuna was more than a prince. He was a hero, a living legend. In the royal box, his mother Kunti wept with pride. But next to her, Gandhari, the mother of the Kauravas, turned to her husband, the blind king, and said with a tremor in her voice, "Our sons are completely overshadowed." And Duryodhana stood there, his knuckles white, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His public humiliation was complete. Just as Arjuna was about to be declared the greatest warrior present, a sound boomed from the entrance of the arena, a sound like thunder. All eyes turned as a warrior strode into the field. He was tall, impossibly handsome, and wore golden armor that seemed to shine with the light of the sun itself. He moved with the grace of a panther and the confidence of a god. He looked at Arjuna, his eyes burning with intensity, and his voice rang out across the stadium. "Arjuna," he declared, "I am Karna, and I can do everything you have just done, and I will do it better." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Who was this man? With the grace of a master, Karna perfectly replicated every single one of Arjuna's impossible feats. The crowd was mesmerized. Here at last was a true rival to the great Arjuna. Karna then laid down the ultimate challenge: single combat. Arjuna, his pride stung, readily accepted. The 2 greatest archers on the planet prepared for a duel that would shake the heavens. But just as they were about to begin, the royal preceptor stepped forward. "Hold," he commanded. "Arjuna is a prince of the Kuru dynasty. Protocol dictates he can only duel with someone of equal standing. Tell us, Karna, of what royal family are you?" Silence. Karna's face fell. The divine armor, the godlike skill, it all faded away. He was not a prince. He was a Sutaputra, the son of a humble charioteer, a man who had found him as a baby floating in a basket down the river. He was lowborn. The crowd began to murmur. The Pandavas smirked. Karna was to be disqualified, humiliated before the entire kingdom. But then Duryodhana stepped forward. He had watched this unfold and he saw his chance. He saw not a charioteer's son, but a weapon. His weapon. He threw his arm around Karna and faced the crowd. "Royalty is not the only qualification for greatness," he roared. "If a challenger for Arjuna must be a king, then I will make him one." Right there, in the middle of the arena, Duryodhana ordered the priests to perform a coronation. He poured holy water over Karna's head and declared him the king of Anga, a nearby vassal state. Karna was overwhelmed. The man he had never met, the prince he was prepared to fight, had just saved him from public shame and given him a kingdom. He was overcome with gratitude. He turned to Duryodhana and swore an oath of eternal friendship and unbreakable loyalty. He would be Duryodhana's man, his champion, his brother until the day he died. This was the moment the balance of power shifted forever. The rivalry was no longer just the 100 Kauravas against the 5 Pandavas. Now Duryodhana had found his champion. He had found his answer to Arjuna. An alliance was forged, not of strategy, but of shared humiliation and a burning desire for recognition. And with this one single act, Duryodhana had secured the loyalty of a warrior so powerful. His presence would drag the entire world one giant, terrifying step closer to war. With this alliance, the battle lines were no longer just drawn in the sand of the tournament grounds. They were being carved into the very soul of the Kuru dynasty. The royal court was electric with whispers. The Pandavas, once the undisputed prodigies, now had a true rival in Karna, a warrior of equal, if not greater, skill than Arjuna, who was now backed by the full might and ambition of the Kauravas. The 5 brothers felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. They saw in Karna's eyes the same burning pride as Arjuna, but it was shadowed by a deep and painful bitterness. A bitterness Duryodhana knew exactly how to exploit. The days of training under Drona were now charged with a new intensity. Every archery practice became a duel between Arjuna and Karna. Every mace fight was a clash of titans between Bhima and Duryodhana. The air in the training grounds was thick with unspoken challenges and simmering resentment. Drona, their master, saw all of this. He saw the pride, the jealousy, the ambition, and he knew the time had come for his students to pay their tuition. In ancient India, this payment was known as Guru Dakshina, the teacher's fee. It wasn't paid with gold or jewels, but with an act of service, a deed of loyalty that proved a student had truly mastered their teacher's lessons. One day, Drona gathered all 105 princes before him, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, standing on opposite sides, a silent testament to the growing rift. His voice, usually calm and instructional, was now laced with an old, cold anger. He told them a story from his youth. He spoke of a time when he was a poor but brilliant student, and his closest childhood friend was a boy named Drupada, the prince of a neighboring kingdom called Panchala. They were inseparable. They promised each other that when Drupada became king, he would share half his kingdom with Drona, a vow of eternal friendship. But years passed. Drona remained a poor teacher, struggling to even feed his family, while Drupada ascended to the throne, becoming a powerful and arrogant king. Remembering their promise, Drona traveled to Panchala. He entered the grand court not as a beggar, but as an old friend seeking to remind a king of his word. But King Drupada, surrounded by his wealth and power, laughed in his face. He looked at Drona's worn clothes and thin frame and declared, "Friendship can only exist between equals. A king and a poor teacher cannot be friends. I don't know you." The humiliation was absolute. It was a wound far deeper than any sword could inflict. Drona left the court that day with a fire in his heart, vowing that one day, he would have his revenge. And now, standing before his powerful, well-trained students, he saw his chance. His Guru Dakshina, his teacher's fee, was this. They were to march on the kingdom of Panchala, defeat King Drupada in battle, and bring him back as a captive, chained and humbled. Duryodhana, ever eager to prove his superiority, immediately stepped forward. He, his 99 brothers, and their new champion Karna would be the ones to fulfill their master's wish. They would show the Pandavas what true strength looked like. They assembled their army and marched on Panchala with the force of a tidal wave, confident in their numbers and in Karna's legendary skill. The battle was ferocious. Karna was a storm of arrows, his golden armor shining like a second sun on the battlefield. Duryodhana fought with a brutal fury, but King Drupada was a formidable warrior in his own right, and his army was fighting on its home turf. The Kauravas' attack was powerful but disorganized. It was a blunt instrument of rage, lacking the fine edge of strategy. They fought as individuals, each seeking personal glory, and Drupada's disciplined forces repelled them, time and time again. The Kauravas were forced into a humiliating retreat. Now it was the Pandavas' turn. Arjuna, calm and focused, laid out a plan. It was not about overwhelming force, it was about precision. They would move like a surgeon's scalpel, not a butcher's cleaver. With Yudhishthira commanding the overall formation, Bhima would act as the battering ram to break the front lines, while the twins, Nakula and Sahdeva, would protect their flanks. But the final critical strike would be left to Arjuna. They entered the battlefield, and where the Kauravas had been a chaotic mob, the Pandavas were a single fluid entity. Bhima, roaring with laughter, smashed through Drupada's vanguard, creating the opening Arjuna needed. Arrows flew from Arjuna's bow, Gandiva, with impossible speed and accuracy. He wasn't just fighting soldiers, he was dismantling an army. He cut bowstrings, shattered chariots, and disarmed commanders, creating a path of chaos directly to King Drupada himself. The two warriors faced each other. The king of Panchala, a legend in his own right, found himself completely outmatched. Arjuna's arrows seemed to anticipate his every move, pinning him down, disarming him until finally, the prince of Hastinapura stood over the defeated king. There was no killing blow. As Drona had commanded, they took him captive. They brought the chained and humbled King Drupada back to their teacher. Drona looked down at the man who had once shamed him, the man who now knelt at his feet. The moment of triumph was finally at hand. "Drupada," Drona said, his voice echoing with the memory of that painful day. "You once told me that friendship can only exist between equals. You were a king and I was a beggar. But now I have your kingdom. I am the king. So now I ask for your friendship." To prove his point, Drona did something extraordinary. He didn't execute Drupada. He didn't imprison him for life. He returned half of the kingdom of Panchala back to him. He had taken Drupada's kingdom just as he had vowed, and now he was giving half of it back, making them equals, just as they were supposed to be as children. It was the ultimate revenge, a lesson in humility delivered on the grandest possible scale. But Drona, in his quest for vengeance, had made a fatal error. He thought that by humiliating Drupada, he was ending an old conflict. Instead, he had just ignited a new one, a fire of hatred that would burn far hotter than his own. The now freed King Drupada returned to his half-kingdom a broken man, consumed by a single all-powerful desire: revenge. Revenge against Drona, and by extension, against the Pandavas who had been the instrument of his shame, especially Arjuna. But he knew he couldn't achieve this through conventional means. He needed something more. He needed divine intervention. Drupada sought out the most powerful sages in the land. He began a sacred fire ritual, a yajna, a massive sacrificial ceremony designed to petition the gods for a boon. He poured offerings into the flames, chanting ancient mantras, his voice raw with hatred. He asked the gods for two children. First, a son powerful enough and destined to kill Drona. Second, he asked for a daughter so beautiful and virtuous she would be worthy of marrying the greatest warrior of the age, Arjuna, and through that marriage, bring the Pandavas to his side, securing his ultimate revenge. The gods heard his plea. The sacrificial fire roared, its flames reaching toward the heavens. And from the very heart of that inferno, two figures emerged, fully grown. First came the sun, armed and armored, his eyes filled with a warrior's purpose. They named him Drishtadhyumna, he who is courageous and sacred. His destiny was sealed from the moment of his birth. He would be the man to kill Drona. Then after him, a woman stepped out of the flames. She was darker than a storm cloud, with eyes like lotus petals and a fragrance that filled the air for miles. She was a woman of impossible beauty, born not from a womb, but from pure consecrated fire. They called her Draupadi, she who was the daughter of Drupada, but the world would come to know her by another name, Panchali. And she was not just destined to marry a hero, she was destined to be the catalyst, the spark that would ignite the simmering hatred between the cousins and burn the entire world to ash. Her father, King Drupada, devised a test so impossible, so utterly beyond the skill of any mortal man, that only a true hero, a warrior blessed by the gods themselves, could ever hope to succeed. He staged a grand swayamvara, a ceremony where a princess chooses her own husband from an assembly of suitors. Kings, princes, and warriors from every corner of the known world flocked to the kingdom of Panchala, their eyes filled with ambition and desire. They saw Panchali seated on a throne, radiant as the morning sun, and they saw the prize that would make them legends. Before them stood a colossal steel bow, the kind of weapon that would break the back of a lesser man just to lift it. High above, suspended from the ceiling, a golden fish rotated on a complex mechanism. But here was the catch. To win, a suitor couldn't look at the fish directly. They had to stare down into a shallow pan of oil on the floor, aim using only the wavering, distorted reflection, and pierce the fish's eye with a single arrow. It was a test of strength, of focus, of divine archery. It was a test designed for failure. One by one, the greatest names in the land stepped forward. Mighty kings, famed for their conquests, couldn't even string the bow. It wouldn't bend to their will. Shishupala, the powerful ruler of Chedi, was thrown back, humiliated. Jarasandha, the titan-like emperor of Magadha, a man who could tear another in two with his bare hands, was humbled by the unyielding steel. The laughter in the hall slowly died, replaced by a stunned silence. The test was not just difficult, it was a mockery of their power. Then came Duryodhana. He strained, his muscles bulging, his face turning crimson with effort, but the bowstring wouldn't reach its mark. He stumbled back in a rage. And then a figure stepped forward who silenced the entire court. It was Karna, the son of a charioteer, yet a warrior whose skill was whispered to be the equal of any man alive. He walked to the bow, and with a grace that shamed all who came before him, he lifted it and drew the string. A gasp rippled through the hall. He was going to do it. But as he took aim, Panchali's voice, clear and cold as a mountain stream, cut through the silence. "I will not wed the son of a charioteer." The arrow was never fired. Karna lowered the bow, a bitter, ironic smile on his lips. He was denied not by the test, but by the prize herself. Humiliated, rejected, he walked away, the sting of his low birth once again defining his destiny. With Karna's failure, all hope seemed lost. The kings began to mutter in anger. Had Drupada invited them all here just to shame them? It was then that a small group, seated off to the side, drew attention. They were dressed in the simple, ragged robes of Brahmins, religious ascetics who lived on charity. They looked poor, unassuming, out of place amidst the royal splendor. One of them, a young man with the powerful build of a warrior hidden beneath his simple cloth, stood up and began walking towards the bow. The court erupted, first with snickers, then with open, derisive laughter. A beggar? A Brahmin presuming to attempt what kings and princes had failed to do. It was an insult. But the young man didn't falter. He walked with a quiet confidence, a serene focus that unnerved the mocking crowd. This was Arjuna, the third Pandava hidden in plain sight. He reached the bow. He didn't bow to the kings, he bowed to the weapon itself, a sign of respect a true warrior understands. With one smooth, effortless motion, he lifted the bow, strung it with a sound like a thunderclap, and knocked an arrow. He didn't even seem to pause. His eyes glanced once at the shimmering reflection in the oil, his arm drew back, and he released. The arrow flew, a blur of motion, a whisper of sound straight up. A tiny, almost imperceptible thunk echoed through the now deathly silent hall. And then from the ceiling the golden fish fell, its eye perfectly pierced. For a moment there was nothing, just the collective, stunned intake of breath of 1,000 men. Then chaos. The Brahmins in the audience erupted in cheers for their champion. The kings, however, exploded in fury. They were not just defeated, they had been shamed. Shamed by a nobody, a poor priest who had stolen the world's greatest prize from under their very noses. They drew their swords, shouting, "This is against the rules. A Brahmin cannot compete. Kill him." A full-blown riot was about to engulf the hall. But then the disguised Brahmin's brother stood up. One, a man of immense size and strength, Bhima, simply uprooted a massive pillar from the hall and held it like a club, daring anyone to come closer. The kings, seeing the raw, terrifying power of these supposed beggars, hesitated. In the confusion, Arjuna took Panchali by the hand, and the 5 brothers with their new bride, slipped away from the palace and vanished back into the city. They journeyed back to the humble potter's hut where they were living in hiding with their mother, Kunti. Bursting through the door, filled with the joy of their victory, one of them called out, "Mother, you won't believe the prize we have won today." Kunti, her back to them, was busy with her evening prayers. Without turning to look, thinking they had brought back charitable food or alms, she gave a simple automatic reply. "Whatever it is, my sons, share it equally among yourselves." The words hung in the air. The brothers froze. Arjuna looked at Panchali. Panchali looked at the 5 men who had just won her. And they all looked at their mother, whose casual, unthinking command had just become an unshakable law. In their world, a mother's word was sacred. It was an extension of Dharma, of cosmic duty. To disobey it was to invite ruin. But to obey it meant that all 5 brothers would have to share one wife. An act unheard of, an act that went against all social and religious law. They were trapped. Their own righteousness had become their cage. As they stood in horrified silence, the great sage Vyasa, the very author of their story, their grandfather, materialized in the hut. He saw their dilemma, the impossible choice between breaking their mother's word and breaking the laws of society. And he told them a story. He told them of Panchali's previous life, where she had prayed to the great god Shiva for a husband. In her devotion, she had repeated her request 5 times. Shiva please granted her wish. "In your next life," he had decreed, "you will have 5 husbands." Vyasa then explained that each Pandava brother embodied one of the 5 cosmic qualities she had prayed for. Yudhishthira, the embodiment of righteousness, Bhima of unmatched strength, Arjuna of skill and courage, and the twins Nakula and Sahdeva of beauty and wisdom. This was not an accident. It was not a mistake. It was destiny. A divine plan set in motion lifetimes ago was now coming to fruition. Kunti's words were not a command but a prophecy. Hearing this, King Drupada, who had followed them and was initially enraged at the idea, finally understood. This was no mere marriage, it was a cosmic event. An alliance not just of kingdoms but of fate itself. And so, the unthinkable happened. Panchali, the fire-born princess, was married to all 5 Pandava brothers, binding their souls together in a single unbreakable bond. The news spread like wildfire. But the most important ears it reached were in the palace of Hastinapura. There, Duryodhana learned that his cousins, the men he had tried to burn alive, the men he thought were ghosts, were not only alive and well, they were now allied with one of the most powerful kingdoms in the land. His plot had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly. The 5 brothers he had tried to erase from the world were back. And this time they weren't just coming for their share of the kingdom. They were coming for everything. The royal court of Hastinapura was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. And that spark had just arrived. The news of the Pandavas' survival, and their new powerful alliance with King Drupada, spread through the city like a wildfire. For the common people it was a miracle. Their beloved princes were alive. But for Duryodhana it was a nightmare. The ghosts he thought he'd buried had come back to haunt him, stronger than ever. The 5 brothers, along with their new wife Draupadi, made their grand return to the capital. They were no longer the naive boys who had walked into a death trap. They were hardened men, kings in their own right, with an army at their back. They walked into the court, their eyes fixed on the blind king Dhritarashtra, who sat trembling on the throne. The silence was deafening. Every courtier, every minister held their breath. This was the moment of reckoning. Duryodhana, seething, refused to even look at them. His uncle, the cunning Shakuni, whispered in his ear, fanning the flames of his hatred. But the elders of the court, the wise Vidura and the grand patriarch Bhishma, knew this was a crisis that could not be ignored. They cornered the blind king. They told him in no uncertain terms, "You cannot deny them. The people love them. The law is on their side. To deny them their birthright now would mean civil war, a war you would surely lose." Dhritarashtra was trapped. His love for his villainous son was absolute, but his fear of losing his kingdom was even greater. He couldn't give the Pandavas what they rightfully deserved. Half the kingdom, including the capital, because Duryodhana would never allow it. But he couldn't give them nothing, for fear of the armies they now commanded. So he did what weak men in power always do. He engineered a compromise that was, in truth, a cleverly disguised insult. He summoned his nephew Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas. With a voice full of false sincerity, he declared that to avoid further conflict, he would split the kingdom. He would grant the Pandavas their own land to rule. A wave of relief washed over the court. But then came the catch. The land he offered them was a place called Kandavaprastha. This wasn't just undeveloped land. It was a cursed wasteland, a barren, desolate, snake-infested jungle that had been uninhabitable for centuries. It was a place where nothing grew, a place ancient kings had abandoned. It was the kingdom's garbage dump. The message was crystal clear. Here is your kingdom. Go there and fail. Go there and be forgotten. Go there and die. It was a political checkmate. If the Pandavas accepted, they were doomed to obscurity and poverty. If they refused, they would be branded as warmongers, ungrateful princes who rejected the king's generous offer. Duryodhana could barely contain his glee. He had won. He had given them a kingdom of dust and snakes. But then, to the absolute shock of everyone in the court, Yudhishthira, the very embodiment of duty and righteousness, bowed his head. "We accept," he said. His brothers were aghast. Bhima, the mighty warrior, clenched his fist so hard his knuckles turned white. Arjuna, the master archer, stared at his older brother in disbelief. Why would he accept this ultimate humiliation? But Yudhishthira's resolve was firm. His duty, his dharma, was to prevent war and suffering. If accepting a wasteland was the price of peace, he would pay it. Bound by their vow of obedience to their elder brother, the Pandavas had no choice but to agree. They turned their backs on the gleaming city of Hastinapura and set out for the wilderness, followed by a small contingent of loyal citizens who refused to abandon them. But they were not alone. Their cousin, their friend, their guide, Krishna, was with them. As they stood at the edge of the menacing, overgrown forest, Krishna smiled. He told them this wasn't a curse but a canvas, an opportunity to build something new, something pure, free from the corruption and decay of the old court. He told them that with will and divine grace, even a wasteland could become a paradise. And so the work began. Krishna summoned the divine architect, Vishwakarma, the builder of the gods. He summoned Agni, the god of fire, to purify the land. A great cleansing fire swept through the forest, burning away the desolation, the sickness, and the evil spirits that resided there. From the ashes, something miraculous began to rise. Under the guidance of Vishwakarma, the Pandavas and their people built a city. But this was no ordinary city of brick and stone. It was a city of dreams. The streets were wide and perfectly planned. The buildings seemed to be carved from jewels, gleaming in the sun. Fountains of crystal-clear water flowed in magnificent public gardens. It was a marvel of engineering and magic. A city so beautiful, so prosperous, and so perfectly just that it was said to rival even the capital city of the gods. They named it Indraprastha, the city of Indra. Word of this new paradise spread across the land. Merchants, artists, scholars, and warriors flocked to Indraprastha. It became the new center of culture, wealth, and power. The Pandavas, once exiled to a wasteland, now ruled over the most magnificent city in the world. Yudhishthira's righteous rule brought unparalleled prosperity. Bhima's strength ensured its protection. Arjuna's prowess expanded its influence. The insult that was meant to destroy them had become the foundation of their glory. Back in Hastinapura, the news of Indraprastha's splendor was like poison in Duryodhana's veins. Every story of its wealth, every song of its beauty, was a personal torment. The cousins he had tried to burn alive, the rivals he had exiled to a barren pit, were now more celebrated, more powerful, and more loved than he had ever been. His jealousy, already a raging inferno, now consumed his every waking thought. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He saw the gleaming towers of Indraprastha in his nightmares. To cement his new status as a preeminent ruler, Yudhishthira decided to perform the Rajasuya Yajna, a grand imperial sacrifice. This was a ritual only a king who commanded the respect of all other kings could perform. It was a declaration to the world that he was now an emperor, a king of kings. Invitations were sent to every kingdom, including Hastinapura. To refuse the invitation would be an act of defiance, an act of war. Duryodhana and his family were forced to attend. They were forced to travel to their rival's new city and witness their triumph firsthand. The moment Duryodhana set foot in Indraprastha, his soul curdled with envy. The palace was a breathtaking work of magical architecture. The floors were polished to such a mirror-like sheen that they looked like pools of water. Pools of water were so still and clear they looked like polished floors. It was a palace of illusions, designed to delight the pure of heart and confuse the wicked. And Duryodhana was utterly confused. Walking through the grand assembly hall, he saw what he thought was a shimmering pool of water in his path. Not wanting to get his royal robes wet, he foolishly lifted them high as he walked across. The court, including the Pandavas and their wife Draupadi, erupted in laughter. It was a polished floor. Humiliated, his face burning red, he stormed onward, only to then mistake a real pool of water for a polished floor. He walked straight into it, falling with a great splash, soaking himself from head to toe. The hall roared with laughter once more. But this time one laugh cut deeper than all the others. It was the laugh of Draupadi. As he sputtered and struggled out of the water, she looked down at him and uttered the words that would seal the fate of millions. The words that would become the final unforgivable insult. A blind man's son, she mocked, is also blind. In that moment something inside Duryodhana snapped. The years of jealousy, the simmering hatred, the public humiliation. It all coalesced into a singular burning point of rage. This was no longer about a kingdom. This was about his honor, his pride. He had been laughed at, ridiculed in front of the entire world by the woman who was married to his 5 greatest enemies. He returned to Hastinapura not just as a jealous cousin, but as a man hell-bent on total and absolute revenge. He didn't just want their kingdom anymore. He wanted to strip them of their wealth, their power, their pride. He wanted to humiliate them in a way they could never recover from. And his uncle, the master of deceit, Shakuni, knew just how to do it. He had a plan that didn't involve armies or weapons, but a simple pair of dice. A game of chance that would lead not to victory or defeat, but to the utter ruin of the Pandavas. The great hall of Hastinapura was transformed. No longer a court of justice or a place of royal council, it was now a grand gambling den. At its center, 2 men sat across a board. On one side, Yudhishthira, the emperor, the very embodiment of Dharma, his face a mask of stoic calm. On the other, Shakuni, his eyes gleaming with a venomous joy, a pair of ivory dice resting in his palm. The Kauravas, led by a smirking Duryodhana, gathered around, their energy a mix of anticipation and predatory hunger. The elders, Bhishma, Drona, Vidura, watched from their thrones, a deep unease settling over them like a shroud. The invitation had been a royal command, a friendly game of dice, Duryodhana had called it, but a challenge is a challenge. For a king of the Kshatriya warrior class, to refuse a challenge to a game of chance was an act of cowardice, a stain on his honor. Yudhishthira, bound by his own rigid code, had no choice but to accept. He knew it was a trap. Every instinct screamed at him. But his dharma, his sacred duty as he saw it, compelled him to play. Shakuni smiled, a slow reptilian curl of the lips. "Let us begin, nephew. A small wager to start? A string of priceless pearls." Yudhishthira nodded, and Shakuni rattled the dice. They felt alive in his hand, not just bone and ivory, but extensions of his will. He cast them and they tumbled, dancing to a tune only he could hear before settling. He had won. Again they played. For chests of gold. Yudhishthira lost. For 1,000 elephants draped in silk and silver. Lost. For the entire royal treasury of Indraprastha. Lost. With every throw, Shakuni's laughter grew louder, echoing in the silent, horrified hall. The dice were not merely lucky. They were bewitched, enchanted, obeying their master's every dark desire. Yudhishthira, the man who had conquered a continent through righteousness, was being dismantled piece by a cheater's game. Vidura, the wise prime minister, could bear it no longer. He stood, his voice trembling with rage. "Stop this madness. King Dhritarashtra, command your son to end this charade. This is not a game. It is the gateway to ruin." But Dhritarashtra, blind in his eyes and blinder in his love for his son, remained silent. Duryodhana just laughed. "Uncle Vidura, why so concerned? It is just a friendly game between cousins." The stakes escalated. The game had moved beyond wealth. Shakuni leaned in, his voice a poisonous whisper. "You have nothing left of value, Yudhishthira, except perhaps your brothers." A collective gasp went through the hall. To wager a human being was an unthinkable sin. But Yudhishthira, trapped in a spiral of loss and honor, felt he had to win them back. He staked his youngest brother, the handsome Nakula, and lost. Then Sahadeva, the wise twin, and lost. Then the mighty Arjuna, the greatest archer in the world, lost. Then the powerhouse Bhima, strong as 10,000 elephants, lost. With each loss, a Pandava brother was forced to stand as a slave of Duryodhana, stripped of his royalty, his dignity ground into the dust. Yudhishthira's face was now ashen. He had lost everything. His kingdom, his wealth, his brothers. He himself was all that was left. Shakuni cackled. Well, nephew, you still have yourself. Stake yourself and win everything back with one throw. In a final desperate act, Yudhishthira wagered his own freedom. The dice rolled. He lost. He was now a slave. The emperor of the world was a slave in his own family's court. Duryodhana rose, his chest puffed with triumph. The ultimate victory was his. But for Shakuni, the ruin was not yet complete. The deepest wound had not yet been inflicted. He looked at the broken emperor and said, "You say you have lost everything, but you are mistaken. You still have one jewel left, one prize of immense value. You still have your wife, Draupadi. Stake her." Silence. A profound, deathly silence fell over the assembly. The world seemed to stop turning. Even the most hardened warriors felt a cold dread creep up their spines. Bhishma's head fell into his hands. Drona looked away in shame. To wager one's wife was an act so depraved, so far beyond the pale of human decency, that no one had ever conceived of it. But Yudhishthira, his mind clouded by shame, his judgment destroyed by the twisted logic of the game, saw it as his only path, his last, desperate chance to reverse the catastrophe. He whispered the words, "I stake Draupadi." The dice clattered on the board. Shakuni screamed in triumph. "She is ours." Duryodhana's joy was boundless. He ordered one of his brothers, Dushasana, "Go, drag the slave Draupadi here. Let her sweep the floors, as is her duty." Dushasana, a man of brutish cruelty, stormed into the queen's chambers. He found her in a single cloth, preparing for a bath. He grabbed her by her long black hair and began to drag her, kicking and screaming, into the court. She was hauled before the assembly of kings, warriors, and sages. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes in disarray, her eyes blazing with a fire that could burn worlds. She looked at the silent, shamed faces of the elders, the great Bhishma, the teacher Drona, the wise Kripa, men who had bounced her on their knees as a child, men who were sworn to protect the honor of the family, and they did nothing. They sat like statues of stone, their heads bowed, their honor dead. Draupadi's voice, clear and strong, rang through the hall. She was not pleading. She was demanding. She posed a question of law, of Dharma, so profound it stumped the greatest minds of the age. "I ask this assembly of elders, did the king lose himself first and then stake me? Or did he stake me while he was still a free man? If he was already a slave, then he had no right to wager anything, least of all his wife. Tell me. Answer me." No one could answer. Her logic was a spear, pinning them to their thrones of shame. Duryodhana, enraged by her defiance, sneered, "A slave has no right to ask questions." He patted his thigh and made a vulgar gesture, inviting her to sit on his lap. The insult was so vile that Bhima, the enslaved Pandava, roared like a wounded lion, vowing that one day he would break that very thigh in battle. But the worst was yet to come. Duryodhana, wanting to complete her humiliation, gave a terrible command. "Dushasana, strip her of her clothes. Let the slave stand naked before this court." Dushasana grabbed the end of Draupadi's sari. The Pandavas roared in helpless fury, but they were slaves, bound by their older brother's oath. The elders closed their eyes, unable to watch the horror. Draupadi, seeing that no mortal man would save her, that Dharma had been abandoned in this hall of horrors, did the only thing she could. She closed her eyes and prayed. She prayed to Krishna, "O Govinda, O protector of the universe, they are abandoning me. Save my honor." As Dushasana pulled, a miracle occurred. The cloth began to unspool. He pulled and pulled, but the sari would not end. He pulled with all his might, yards and yards of fabric piling up on the floor around him, but still Draupadi remained clothed. The sari was endless. It was a river of divine grace, a shield woven from faith itself. Krishna, miles away in his kingdom of Dvarka, had heard her prayer. He had answered. Dushasana, exhausted and bewildered, finally collapsed, buried under a mountain of multicolored silk. The court was stunned into silence, witnessing a divine intervention. Frightful omens began to appear. Jackals howled outside the palace. The sky darkened. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, was suddenly terrified. He realized they had crossed a line, a cosmic boundary of evil that could bring about the destruction of their entire race. Shaking, he turned to Draupadi. "Ask for a boon, noble queen. Ask for anything." Draupadi, with immense dignity, asked for one thing. "Let my husbands be freed from slavery." Dhritarashtra granted it instantly. "Ask for another," he urged. She replied. "Let them have their weapons and their kingdom back." "Granted," he cried, desperate to appease the forces he had angered. He offered a third boon, but she refused. "A warrior's wife," she said, "is entitled to only 2 boons. To ask for a third would be greed." The Pandavas were free. Their kingdom was restored. Seemed the crisis was over. As they prepared to leave Hastinapura, their dignity battered but intact, Duryodhana seethed. He could not stand it. He had won, and yet he had lost. He went to his father, his voice thick with rage and jealousy. "You have ruined us. You have given them back their fangs. They will return with an army and destroy us for what we have done today. We must call them back." And Shakuni, ever the schemer, stepped forward with a new proposal. "Let us have one more game of dice. Just one final throw. The loser will not lose their kingdom, but will go into exile in the forest for 12 years. And a 13th year, they must live in hiding unrecognized. If they are discovered in that 13th year, they must repeat the entire exile. Let us see if their luck holds now." The trap was being set again, and this time it would be the final push that would lead the world inevitably to war. The 13th year. The year of incognito. A single misstep, one moment of recognition, and the last 12 years of suffering would be for nothing. The Pandavas had to become ghosts, hiding in plain sight. They chose the kingdom of Matsya, ruled by the noble but somewhat oblivious King Virata. It was a calculated risk, a kingdom powerful enough to be a hub of activity, but not so close to Hastinapura that they'd be immediately recognized. They approached the city gates not as a royal family, but as scattered refugees, each with a story, each with a new identity. Yudhishthira, the emperor of the world, walked in as Kanka, a Brahmin scholar and master of dice, offering his services as a court advisor to the king. The irony was thick enough to choke on. The man who lost everything in a game of dice now offered his expertise in that very game. A constant, painful reminder of his failure, worn as a disguise. Bhima, the titan whose strength could reroute rivers, became Vallabha, a master chef. The man who wrestled demons and crushed armies with his bare hands now found himself in the royal kitchens, wrestling dough and commanding an army of spices. He promised the king he could prepare dishes worthy of the gods, a small boast that hid the colossal power he was forced to keep under lock and key. The most shocking transformation was Arjuna's, the greatest archer the world had ever known. The warrior who had humbled gods took on the identity of Brihanala. During his travels in the heavens, he had rejected the advances of an Apsara, a celestial nymph named Urvashi. Scorned, she cursed him to live as a eunuch for 1 year. At the time it felt like a terrible slight, but now it was the perfect disguise. As Brihanala, a teacher of dance and music to the royal princess, no one would ever suspect him of being the world's mightiest warrior. A curse had become a blessing. The handsome twins, Nakula and Sahdeva, used their unique skills. Nakula, the master of horses, became Granthika, a superintendent of the royal stables. Sahdeva, with his unparalleled knowledge of cattle, became Tantapala, the chief of the royal cowherds. They melted into the background, their royal lineage buried under the dust of their daily labor. And then there was Draupadi, a queen born of fire, empress of a grand kingdom, now forced to seek employment as a handmaiden. Under the name Sarandri, she offered her services to Queen Sadeshna, Virata's wife. She claimed she was a servant from a once great house, now on the run from the unwanted advances of a powerful man. A story that was tragically close to the truth. She made one condition. She would serve the queen, but she would not be asked to serve other men or wash their feet, a small desperate attempt to hold onto a sliver of her former dignity. The queen, intrigued by her beauty and grace, agreed. For months the plan worked. They performed their duties flawlessly. They were the perfect servants, the perfect courtiers, invisible in their roles. The days bled into weeks, the weeks into months. They were so close. The finish line was in sight. But a fire cannot be hidden forever, and Draupadi's beauty was a flame that drew the most dangerous kind of moth. His name was Kishaka. He was the commander-in-chief of the Matsya army and, more importantly, the brother of Queen Sudeshna. He was, for all intents and purposes, the most powerful man in the kingdom besides the king himself. He was used to getting what he wanted, and from the moment he saw Sarandri he wanted her. He approached her, his words dripping with arrogance and lust. Draupadi, with quiet steel, refused him. She reminded him that she was a married woman, protected by 5 powerful Gandharvas, celestial husbands she claimed, who would not tolerate any man who dishonored her. It was a bluff, a desperate shield made of words, but Kishaka just laughed. He saw a servant, not a queen. He saw prey, not a predator's mate. He went to his sister, the queen, demanding she send Sarandri to his chambers with a jug of wine. Queen Sudeshna, either too weak or too afraid to defy her powerful brother, complied. She ordered Draupadi to go. Draupadi pleaded, she begged, but the queen was unmoved. Trapped, she took the jug and walked toward Kishaka's quarters, praying to the sun god for protection. As she entered, Kishaka grabbed her, his intentions clear. Draupadi shoved him with all her might. He stumbled, shocked by her strength, and she fled, running from the room, from the monster, straight into the one place she thought would be safe, the royal court, in full view of King Virata and his courtiers. Among those courtiers was the gambler Kanka, Yudhishthira. And in the kitchens nearby, the cook Vallabha Bhima heard the commotion. Kishaka, enraged and humiliated, stormed into the court after her. He caught her by the hair, right there in front of the entire assembly, in front of her disguised husband, the king of justice, and he kicked her to the ground. A collective gasp filled the hall. King Virata said nothing. The courtiers looked away. And Yudhishthira, his heart a storm of fury and shame, could do nothing but watch. He saw Bhima, standing at the edge of the hall, his knuckles white, his entire body trembling with a rage that could level the building. Their eyes met. Yudhishthira gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. Not now. We cannot break our vow. Not now. Bhima clenched his jaw, a low growl rumbling in his chest, and forced himself to stand down. The promise they made was a cage, and right now it felt like torture. Draupadi lay on the floor weeping, not just from the pain, but from the utter desolation of being publicly assaulted, while her heroic husbands watched, powerless to defend her. She looked at the king, at the court, at her own husband, and saw only silence. She was completely, terrifyingly alone. That night, the palace slept, but Draupadi did not. She crept through the silent corridors to the kitchens, where she found Bhima. The moment he saw her tear-streaked face and the bruise forming on her cheek, the dam of his restraint finally broke. She didn't need to say a word. He saw the culmination of 13 years of humiliation in her eyes. The loaded dice, the disrobing, the forced exile, and now this final unbearable insult. No more, he whispered, his voice like grinding stone. This ends now. Together they forged a plan, a trap. The next day, Draupadi, feigning fear and submission, told Kishaka that she would meet him that night. She told him she was afraid of his power and had no choice but to give in. But she insisted they meet in secret in the royal dance hall, long after midnight when no one would see them. Kishaka, swollen with pride and victory, readily agreed. He spent the day preening, dreaming of his conquest. As midnight approached, he slipped out of his chambers and made his way to the darkened dance hall. The hall was empty and silent. He saw a figure lying on a divan in the shadows, covered by a sheet, and assumed it was Sarandri, waiting for him. He walked over, his voice a triumphant whisper in the dark. "My beautiful Sarandri, you have finally come to your senses. You have no idea how long I have waited for this moment." He reached out and touched the shoulder of the figure on the bed, and the figure sat up. But it wasn't the soft, trembling form of a handmaiden. It was a mountain of muscle and righteous fury. It was Bhima. Before Kishaka could even scream, Bhima's hands were on him. This wasn't a fight. It was an execution. It was the unleashing of 12 years of pent-up rage. Bhima didn't just want to kill Kishaka. He wanted to erase him. He broke his arms, then his legs. He twisted his neck and crushed his skull. With the primal fury of a storm, Bhima folded and pounded Kishaka's body until it was a grotesque, unrecognizable ball of flesh, muscle, and shattered bone. He left the remains in the center of the dance hall, a gruesome testament to a promise kept. The next morning, the discovery of the commander's body sent a wave of terror through the kingdom. No one could comprehend what had happened. The guards who found him couldn't even tell it was a human body at first. When the truth was revealed, whispers flew. It had to be the work of Sarandri's Gandharv husbands. Who else possessed such monstrous, otherworldly strength? The Pandavas' secret was safe for now. But an act of such violent, superhuman power does not go unnoticed. Far away in Hastinapura, Duryodhana's spies had been scouring the continent for a year, looking for any sign of the Pandavas. And now a strange rumor reached their ears. A story from the kingdom of Matsya, about the impossibly brutal death of their commander-in-chief, allegedly at the hands of a celestial being. Duryodhana's master spy, his mind sharp as a razor, began to put the pieces together. Immense inhuman strength, a beautiful, mysterious servant woman. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead they had. The 13th year was drawing to a close. Only a few days remained. But as the Pandavas held their breath, praying they had made it, an army was beginning to march. The hunters had finally picked up the scent. The scent led them to the kingdom of Matsya. Duryodhana, consumed by a feverish impatience, devised a plan. It wasn't subtle, but it was brutally effective. A trap, baited with an entire kingdom's wealth. He summoned King Sasharma, a bitter rival of Matsya's King Virata. He fed Sasharma's ambition, promising him support and riches if he would launch a massive cattle raid on Matsya from the south. It was the perfect diversion. While Virata's army was occupied, Duryodhana and the full might of the Kaurava forces, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, all of them, would strike from the north, stealing the rest of the cattle. The objective wasn't just cows. It was to create a crisis so total, so overwhelming, that every able-bodied man in the kingdom would be forced to fight. And if the Pandavas were there, they would have no choice but to reveal themselves. The plan worked flawlessly. Sasharma's army crashed against Matsya's southern border. The alarm was raised. King Virata, a proud and capable warrior, immediately rallied his forces. He called upon his most trusted advisors and strongest fighters, the quiet but wise Kanka, the hulking cook Vallabha, and the two stable hands Tantripala and Granthika. The four disguised brothers answered the call without hesitation. The king marched south with the bulk of his army, leaving the capital city, and his young son, Prince Uttara, virtually undefended. And then the hammer fell. Lookouts on the northern wall saw a cloud of dust on the horizon, a cloud that grew and grew, resolving itself into a sea of banners, chariots, and steel. The greatest army the world had ever seen had arrived at their doorstep. Bhishma, the unkillable grandsire. Drona, the master of war. Karna, the radiant son of the sun god. And Duryodhana himself, hungry for his final victory. The shepherds fled in terror as the Kaurava soldiers began rounding up tens of thousands of cattle. The kingdom was being torn apart. Inside the palace, panic erupted. The king was gone. The army was gone. All that was left was Prince Uttara. Uttara was young, arrogant, and had spent years bragging to the court ladies about his unmatched skill in battle, battles he had never actually fought. Now his moment had come. He strode into the throne room, puffed up with false confidence. "Do not fear," he boomed. "If only I had a worthy charioteer, I would go out this instant and defeat this entire army by myself. I would send them all running and reclaim our wealth." His words, meant to inspire, hung empty in the terrified air. It was a bluff and everyone knew it. But then a soft voice cut through the tension. It was Brihanala, the palace dance teacher. "Prince," she said, her voice strangely steady, "I served as a charioteer to the great Arjuna himself. I learned from the best. I can handle a chariot. If you will have me, I will drive for you." The prince looked at the dancer, at her flowing clothes and bracelets. It was absurd. But he was trapped by his own boasting. To refuse now would be to admit his fear. With a nervous laugh, he agreed. The fate of a kingdom now rested on the shoulders of a terrified boy and his dance teacher. They rode out of the city gates in Uttara's magnificent chariot. But as they crested a hill and the prince saw the sheer scale of the Kaurava army, an ocean of warriors stretching to the horizon, all the bravado evaporated. His face went white. His hands started to tremble. He wasn't a hero. He was just a boy. "Turn back," he shrieked at Brihanala. "We can't fight them. This is suicide. Turn the chariot around." Brihanala did not turn back. Instead, she urged the horses forward, faster and faster, straight towards the enemy. The prince, now weeping with terror, threw down his bow and jumped from the moving chariot, trying to run back to the city. Brihanala stopped the chariot, leapt down, her long braid flying behind her, and easily caught the fleeing prince. She dragged him back, effortlessly lifting him onto the chariot. "A warrior does not flee," she said, her voice no longer soft but hard as iron. "You will not fight, but you will watch." She steered the chariot not towards the army, but towards a massive ancient shami tree standing alone in the field. "There is something you must see," she said. She brought the chariot to a halt and told the bewildered prince to climb the tree. "You will find a bundle," she instructed. "Bring it down." Uttara, still shaking, did as he was told. He found a large, heavy bundle wrapped in cloth. It looked like a corpse. With great effort, he brought it down. Brihanala began to unwrap it. The cloth fell away and Uttara gasped. Inside were not bones but weapons. Weapons that seemed to hum with a divine energy. There was a colossal bow that pulsed with golden light, quivers of arrows that never emptied, a sword that shimmered like a captured star. "Whose are these?" the prince whispered, his fear momentarily forgotten, replaced by awe. Brihanala picked up the golden bow, the Gandiva. It settled into her hand as if it were a part of her. "These," she said, her voice dropping, losing its feminine lilt and deepening into a powerful baritone, "belonged to the 5 Pandava brothers." She turned to face the prince, and for the first time, Uttara saw past the disguise. He saw the fire in her eyes, the warrior's stance, the raw power held in check. "I am not Brihanala," he declared, his voice ringing across the field. "I am Arjuna." The transformation was absolute. In an instant, the dancer was gone, and in his place stood the single greatest archer the world had ever known. He was no longer in exile. He was home. "Drive the chariot, Prince Uttara," Arjuna commanded, and the terrified boy, now filled with a reverence that bordered on worship, obeyed without question. He took the reins as Arjuna strung the mighty Gandiva. The bowstring let out a roar like thunder, a sound that echoed across the battlefield. The Kaurava commanders heard it, and they knew. Bhishma lowered his weapon. Drona smiled grimly. "That is the sound of only one bow," he said. "The Gandiva. Arjuna is here." Duryodhana's face twisted into a triumphant sneer. "Fools! We've found them. And look, the 13th year is not yet over. They have been discovered. Prepare for another 12 years of exile, my cousins." But Bhishma, the keeper of time, corrected him. "No, Duryodhana. By my calculations, the 13th year ended yesterday. They have fulfilled their vow. The game was over. The war was on." Arjuna didn't wait. He raised his bow and fired an arrow that created a sound so deafening, so terrifying, that it stunned a portion of the Kaurava army. Then he unleashed a divine weapon, the Samahana, the arrow of sleep. It flew over the battlefield, and a mystical wind washed over the ranks. Thousands of ordinary soldiers simply fell where they stood, overcome by a deep magical slumber. He had no quarrel with them. His targets were the commanders, the architects of his family's suffering. He drove straight for Drona, his beloved teacher. He fired a volley of arrows, not at Drona but at his feet, a sign of respect even in battle. Drona fired back, the master and student trading blows that lit up the sky. Arjuna bypassed him. He faced Karna. The rivalry that had simmered for 13 years finally exploded. Arrows flew so fast they blotted out the sun. But Arjuna, wielding the Gandiva, was untouchable. He shattered Karna's bow, killed his charioteer, and forced him to retreat from the field, shamed and defeated. One by one, he engaged the greatest warriors alive. He humbled them all. He was not just a warrior. He was a force of nature, a storm of divine retribution. Finally, he cornered Duryodhana. He didn't try to kill him. He just humiliated him, shattering his crown with a blunt arrow and forcing him to flee. In a single afternoon, one man had routed the most powerful army in the world. He had reclaimed every last head of cattle. His work was done. As they rode back towards the city, the sleeping soldiers beginning to stir, Arjuna handed the Gandiva back to Uttara. "Take these weapons and hide them again," he said, his voice softening, becoming Brihanala's once more. "When we return, tell everyone that you defeated the Kaurava army. It was your courage that saved us." The prince, his mind still reeling, could only nod. They returned to the city as heroes, Prince Uttara, the savior of Matsya, and his mysterious charioteer. News of the impossible victory reached King Virata as he returned from his own battle in the south. He was ecstatic, overjoyed at his son's prowess. But as the celebrations began, a messenger arrived from the Kaurava camp. The message was simple. The Pandavas had been discovered. Their location was known. But the most important question wasn't how they were found. It was when. Duryodhana insisted they were found before the 13th year had expired. Bhishma argued they were not. The entire fate of the world, the question of a final catastrophic war or another 12 years of exile, now hung on a single terrifying calculation of time. Duryodhana, his face a mask of fury, refused to accept it. He screamed that the Pandavas were discovered. Bhishma, the ancient grandsire, stood firm. His voice, though old, cut through the tension of the court like a diamond. He explained the intricate dance of solar and lunar years, the intercalary months that astronomers used to reconcile the heavens. He laid out the calculation with chilling precision. The 13 years were not just complete, they were over by several days. The Pandavas had fulfilled their vow to the letter. Legally, morally, divinely, the kingdom was theirs. But Duryodhana didn't care about the law. He never had. The dice game, the humiliation of Draupadi, the exile, it was all just a means to an end. The calculation of time was just another obstacle to be bulldozed. He looked at the assembled kings and his father, the blind king Dhritarashtra, and uttered the words that would seal the fate of millions. "I will not return their kingdom," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Not a fraction of it. I will not give them enough land to stick a needle in, let alone 5 villages. Let them prepare for war." The declaration hung in the air, a death sentence for an entire generation. There was no more ambiguity, no more legal loopholes to debate. This was naked greed, a refusal born of pure hatred. But even then, one last desperate attempt was made for peace, and it came from the divine himself. Krishna, the cousin to both sides, the charioteer, the kingmaker, the incarnation of God Vishnu on earth, decided to make a final journey to the court of Hastinapura as a peace envoy. He wasn't coming as a god. He was coming as a diplomat, a family member begging his kin to step back from the abyss. When he arrived, the city treated him like a conquering hero. But Krishna had no time for ceremony. He went directly to the court of the blind king. There, before the entire assembly, before Bhishma, Drona, Vidura, and the sneering Duryodhana, Krishna made his plea. He spoke not with the thunder of a god, but with the reasoned, aching voice of a man trying to prevent a slaughter. He reminded them of their shared bloodline. He spoke of the righteousness of the Pandavas' claim. He warned of the consequences of war, of rivers of blood, of fields of widows, of a world reduced to ash and sorrow. He offered a final, shockingly generous compromise. Forget half the kingdom. Just give the Pandavas 5 villages, 1 for each brother. 5 small towns to rule, to live in peace and dignity. A microscopic price to pay to avoid the annihilation of the known world. It was a test, a final chance for Duryodhana to show a sliver of humanity, of reason. The entire court held its breath. The wise elders Vidura and Bhishma begged Duryodhana to accept. His own mother, Gandhari, pleaded with her son to listen to Krishna, to turn away from this path of self-destruction. Duryodhana laughed. He laughed in the face of God. He not only rejected the offer, he called Krishna a sympathizer, a traitor to their cause. And then, in an act of hubris so staggering it defied belief, he gave an order. Arrest him. Seize this cowherd and bind him in chains. If we hold the divine Krishna hostage, the Pandavas will be powerless. The court erupted in chaos. The elders cried out in horror. To lay a hand on an envoy was a crime. To attempt to chain a god was madness beyond comprehension. Soldiers, loyal to their prince, began to advance on Krishna. Krishna just smiled. A slow, sad, terrible smile. "You wish to bind me, Duryodhana?" he asked, his voice suddenly losing all its human warmth, echoing with the sound of galaxies being born. "You think your mortal chains can hold me?" And then it happened. The very fabric of reality in that throne room tore apart. The mortal form of Krishna dissolved into an explosion of impossible light. He began to grow and grow and grow until the roof of the palace vanished and he towered over the world. From his body erupted 1,000 suns, 1,000,000 stars. In his mouth, the terrified courtiers saw swirling nebulae and the endless, crushing void of space. Countless arms sprouted from his form, each holding a divine weapon, discs of fire, maces that could shatter mountains, swords that dripped with cosmic light. From his being poured forth all the gods, all the demons, all the ancestors, and all the creatures of the universe. The blind king Dhritarashtra, for the first time in his life, was granted divine sight, and what he saw made him collapse in pure, unadulterated terror. He was witnessing the Vishvarupa, the universal form, the true form of God. It was not a gentle, loving sight. It was terrifying. It was the raw, untamed, and infinitely powerful engine of all creation and all destruction, revealed in a single blinding moment. The soldiers who had come to arrest him were struck blind, their minds shattered by a sight no mortal was ever meant to see. The entire court, save for the wisest and most devout, fell to the ground, shielding their eyes from the truth of the universe. As quickly as it appeared, the vision vanished. Krishna was once again standing in the center of the room, in his simple human form. The court was in ruins, the minds of men broken. He looked at Duryodhana one last time, not with anger, but with a profound cosmic pity, and then he left. The peace talks were over. The last chance was gone. The news spread like wildfire. War was no longer a threat, it was a certainty. And so the great armies began to gather on the sacred plain of Kurukshetra. Kings and warlords from every corner of the land were called to honor their allegiances. The Pandavas assembled an army of 7 divisions. The Kauravas, with the vast resources of the empire, gathered a terrifying force of 11 millions of men, hundreds of thousands of horses, elephants, and war chariots. The greatest warriors of the age, all converging on one battlefield. On one side, the Kauravas appointed the invincible grandsire Bhishma as their supreme commander, forcing the old man into the unspeakable tragedy of leading an army against his own beloved grandchildren. On the other, the Pandavas chose Drishtadyumna, a prince born from a sacred fire with a single prophesied purpose, to kill the great master Drona. The 2 colossal armies marched onto the plain, facing each other across a narrow stretch of land that would soon be soaked in the blood of kings. The air grew thick with dust and the sound of 1,000,000 conch shells blowing the call to war. The ground itself seemed to tremble. And it is here, in this final moment before the storm, that the Pandavas' greatest warrior, Arjuna, stood in his chariot, with Krishna himself as his charioteer. He asked Krishna to drive him to the center of the battlefield, between the 2 armies, so he could see the men he was about to fight. And as he looked, his heart stopped. He saw his granduncle Bhishma, the man who had practically raised him. He saw his revered teacher, Drona, the master who had taught him everything he knew about archery. He saw cousins, uncles, brothers-in-law, and childhood friends, all standing under the banners of his enemy, ready to kill him. The weight of it all, the sheer soul-crushing horror of this family feud turned apocalypse, finally broke him. The legendary warrior, the greatest archer in the world, began to tremble. His mighty bow, the Gandiva, slipped from his grasp. His knees grew weak, and he slumped to the floor of his chariot, his eyes filled with tears. "I cannot do this, Krishna," he whispered, his voice choked with despair. "I will not fight. It is better to live as a beggar than to rule a kingdom gained by killing my own kin." Krishna, his divine nature hidden behind the smile of a simple charioteer, looked upon his friend. He did not offer simple platitudes or easy comfort. Instead, his voice, calm and steady amidst the growing din of war, cut through Arjuna's grief. "Where did this weakness come from, Arjuna? This is not worthy of you. It does not lead to heaven but to disgrace. Do not give in to this impotence. It does not suit you. Stand up and fight." Arjuna, still reeling, could not comprehend it. "How can I, Krishna? How can I fire arrows at Bhishma, my grandsire? Drona, my teacher? They are worthy of my worship, not my weapons. I see no good in this. I don't desire victory or a kingdom or any pleasure. What is the point of a kingdom? What is the point of life itself, if the very people we would share it with are lined up against us, ready to die? And so began the most profound conversation in all of Hindu scripture, a dialogue that would become a sacred text in its own right, the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Lord. On a battlefield between two massive armies, with time itself seeming to stand still, Krishna revealed his true nature and purpose to his desperate friend. He told Arjuna that what he was grieving for was an illusion. The body is temporary, a set of clothes that a person wears and then discards. But the soul, the Atman, is eternal. It cannot be cut by any weapon, burned by any fire, or withered by any wind. It was never born and it will never die. The people Arjuna saw before him, his grandfathers, his teachers, his cousins, their souls had lived countless lives before this one, and would live countless more after. To grieve for the destruction of the body was to grieve for a worn-out coat. You are a warrior, Arjuna, Krishna explained. Your dharma, your sacred duty, is to fight. To abandon your duty now, out of fear or misplaced attachment, is a greater sin than any act of war. It is a betrayal of your own nature and your purpose in this life. People will speak of your disgrace for ages to come, and for a man of honor, disgrace is worse than death. But Krishna's lesson went deeper. He taught Arjuna the path of karma yoga, the path of selfless action. You have a right to perform your duty, he said, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Fight, Arjuna, but fight without attachment. Fight not for a kingdom, not for revenge, not for glory. Fight because it is your duty to fight. Be steady in victory and in defeat. This evenness of mind is the essence of yoga. To show Arjuna the true scale of what was at stake, Krishna granted him a divine vision. For a moment, Arjuna saw Krishna's universal form. A terrifying, brilliant, all-encompassing being of infinite mouths and eyes, containing all of creation, all gods, all demons, all of time itself. He saw the past, the present, and the future. And in that vision, he saw the Kaurava warriors, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, already rushing into Krishna's fiery mouths, already dead. Krishna's voice boomed like thunder. I am Time, the great destroyer of worlds, and I have come here to destroy all these people. Even without you, all the warriors standing in the opposing army shall cease to be. Therefore get up. Prepare to fight and win glory. Conquer your enemies and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They are already put to death by my arrangement. You, O Arjuna, are but an instrument in my hands. The vision faded. Arjuna, trembling, his hair standing on end, folded his hands. His doubt was gone, burned away by the divine fire he had witnessed. He picked up his Gandiva bow, its string humming with anticipation. My illusion is now gone, he declared, his voice clear and strong. I am firm and free from doubt. I am ready to act according to your instructions. The conch shells blew. The war began. For 18 days, the fields of Kurukshetra ran with blood. It was a war of heroes and gods, of celestial weapons that could boil rivers and shatter mountains. Bhishma, the seemingly invincible grandsire, finally fell, pierced by so many of Arjuna's arrows that his body didn't even touch the ground, resting instead on a bed of shafts. Drona, the master teacher, was tricked into laying down his weapons by a lie about his son's death, and was cut down while in meditation. The most tragic duel was between the two greatest archers, the two half-brothers who never knew their bond, Arjuna and Karna. Karna fought with the fury of a man denied his birthright his entire life. He unleashed weapons that terrified the Pandava army, but one by one, the curses that had plagued him came to pass. His divine chariot wheel sank into the mud, a consequence of a curse from a long ago slight. As he struggled, unarmed and helpless, to free his chariot, he remembered the final curse from his teacher, that he would forget the mantra for his most powerful weapon when he needed it most. He looked to Arjuna, defenseless, and following Krishna's command, Arjuna released the arrow that ended the life of his unknown, elder brother. Finally, only Duryodhana remained. He faced Bhima in a final brutal mace duel. They were evenly matched, their blows shaking the very earth. But Bhima, remembering the humiliation of Draupadi, remembered his vow. With a mighty roar, he struck Duryodhana a blow to the thighs, shattering them, an illegal move in the laws of mace combat. Duryodhana fell, broken but unrepentant, cursing the Pandavas with his dying breath. The Pandavas had won. The war was over. But there was no celebration. As they walked through the battlefield, a vast silent graveyard under a pale moon, the true cost of their victory became clear. The ground was a carpet of bodies. Millions were dead. The air was thick with the cries of widows and orphan children. Yudhishthira, the king who had won his throne, wept. This was not the righteous kingdom he had envisioned. This was a charnel house, built on the bones of his family. Gandhari, the mother of the 100 dead Kaurava princes, saw Krishna and was filled with a mother's bottomless grief and rage. She unleashed a terrible curse upon him. "Just as I have watched my sons slaughter one another," she shrieked, "so too will you watch your own family, the Yadava clan, destroy itself. You will die alone, abandoned in a forest, and your city will sink into the sea." Krishna simply smiled and accepted the curse. He knew it was all part of the grand design. Yudhishthira ruled for 36 years, a just and wise king. But the ghosts of Kurukshetra never left him. The victory was a hollow, bitter thing. When Gandhari's curse came to pass, and Krishna's clan destroyed itself in a drunken brawl, the Pandavas knew their time on earth was over. They gave up their kingdom, dressed themselves in simple bark and deerskin, and began their final journey, walking north towards the Himalayas, seeking the path to heaven. A stray dog began to follow them. One by one they fell. Draupadi was the first to die. Her flaw, Krishna said, was that she loved Arjuna more than her other husbands. Then Sahadeva, for his pride in his own wisdom. Then Nakula, for his pride in his beauty. Then Arjuna, for his pride in his skill as an archer. Then mighty Bhima, for his gluttony and brute strength. Only Yudhishthira, the king of Dharma, remained with the faithful dog still by his side. Finally he reached the gates of heaven. The god Indra appeared, inviting him in. "But what of my brothers and my wife?" Yudhishthira asked. Indra assured him they were already there. As Yudhishthira prepared to enter, Indra stopped him. "The dog cannot come," he said. "It is an unclean animal." Yudhishthira was stunned. "I cannot abandon a creature who has been loyal to me. To abandon one who is devoted is an unforgivable sin. I will not enter heaven without this dog." He turned to leave. At that moment the dog transformed. It was the god Dharma, Yudhishthira's own father in disguise. It had been his final test. "You have passed," Dharma said. "Your compassion transcends all attachment. You are worthy." But inside heaven, a final shock awaited him. He saw his cousins Duryodhana and the Kauravas, sitting on celestial thrones, radiant and happy. But his own brothers and his wife Draupadi were nowhere to be found. "Where are they?" he demanded. The gods led him down a dark, foul-smelling path, to a realm of torment and suffering. There he saw his family, languishing in a version of hell. "This is a mistake," he cried. "Why are my righteous brothers here, while that wicked man Duryodhana sits in heaven?" The gods explained. The Kauravas were in heaven because they died as warriors on the holy field of Kurukshetra, paying for their sins with their lives. The Pandavas were in hell to atone for their small sins and deceptions during the war. The lie that killed Drona, the illegal blow that felled Duryodhana. It was a temporary atonement. Once their karmic debt was paid, they too would ascend. Yudhishthira, faced with the choice, refused to stay in heaven without them, choosing to remain in hell to comfort his family with his presence. This final act of selfless love instantly purified them all, and together, they ascended to their rightful places in the heavens. The Mahabharata is not a simple story of good versus evil. It's a story about the color gray. It teaches that the path of righteousness is as thin as a razor's edge, and that even the noblest of intentions can lead to catastrophic ruin. It is a story that proves that in war, there are no true victors, only survivors left to count the cost. The war on the field of Kurukshetra may have ended in 18 days, but the war for the soul, the battle between duty and desire, between hatred and forgiveness, rages on forever. It rages on inside us all,